Hello, everybody, and happy Thursday. My name is Brandon Thomason. I'm the marketing manager here at revVana, and I'll be acting as the moderator for today's session. So I'll be helping to facilitate any and all of your questions for our webinar today on our two speakers. Our webinar topic today is forecasting total customer value inside of Salesforce, and we have two speakers today. We have Brian Faulkner, who is the VP of Enterprise Sales here at revVana, and we have Derek Black, who is the head of customer success, also here at revVana. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Brian to get started.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it. Well, happy Thursday to everyone as well. So today we're going to go present what kind of a growing trend that we're seeing, which in the Salesforce ecosystem is this idea of organizations investigating ways to get their forecasting data onto the platform. And the desire to go run some of these critical KPIs that come from the forecasting data, like total customer value. So we're going to explore why this is difficult. What are the barriers for people to bring forecasting onto the platform? And then at the end, we'll kind of present some options that are associated with that as well. So in order to do that, we'll look at some current trends. We'll actually delineate or differentiate what we call sales forecasting versus revenue forecasting. Talk a little bit about what Salesforce is doing to fix this. Introduce you to revVana. Derek's going to give you a quick demo, and then we'll leave time at the end for some Q&A. And we're going to keep this high level today, introduce some concepts, but we'll definitely be wrapped up by the bottom of the hour. So when we think about the kind of the current trends that we're seeing, is like number one is the fact that Salesforce is now evangelizing what revVana has been evangelizing now, which is the idea that it's critical to get this forecasting data onto the Salesforce platform. Specifically when you're talking about, wanting this view into the 360-degree view of the customer, you need to understand what do we think the revenue is going to come from the customer, and are we actually realizing the revenue that's coming from that? I think Salesforce has also seen what we've seen is the fact that a lot of people are moving this rise of revenue operations, what we're calling it, which is this idea of people are moving or morphing their careers from your traditional sales operations and moving into this revenue operations role. And over 2024, we've had lots of leads, these inbound leads coming in, and it's really people that are new to that role. And we've been having these conversations with them, and kind of the genesis and the idea behind this webinar was to really kind of publicize what we've been talking to these individuals about. And what we see is kind of this common profile of people moving into this revenue operations role, which is they typically understand automation. They typically own Salesforce. They've implemented sales methodologies. They typically have either done CPQ, commissions, document generation, contract management. So they understand the value of bringing automation to Salesforce. They understand, they've seen the automation on the back, whether it's ERP, FP&A tools, demand gens, PSA tools that are there. But kind of a common conversation that we've had with them is that they move into this revenue operations role, and either the VP of finance or the CFO hand them this complex Excel workbook and say, congratulations, you now own forecasting for our organization. So now all of a sudden they're stuck between the CRO, or the bridge will be positive, the bridge between the CRO and the CFO. And they're typically having to export this data that lives inside of Salesforce, model it inside of Excel, and then give it to people that are doing demand and capacity planning, as well as the CFO to go report to the street or to the board. And so what we've seen is that they've gone in, they get into this role, they typically type in, revenue forecasting Salesforce, and they find revVana, click on, well, have a conversation. And where they've come to us and they've said, number one, help us understand, what is the terminology? What are some of the best practices in this role? And then ultimately what they want to talk to us about is like, hey, there has to be a better way than doing this inside of Excel. And what we're really going to investigate today and have a conversation about is really around why are people stuck in Excel and how to get out of it. So on the education side of things, just when we talk to these individuals, is what we talk to them about is this idea there is a difference between kind of sales forecasting, and there's a bunch of products that are developed to go help with sales forecasting, and the differences between that and revenue forecasting. So you think about sales forecasting, what that's really doing is looking at this opportunity, let's call it a $100,000 opportunity that's going to close in July. Well, the way that Salesforce does sales forecasting is typically it's going to show the whole amount in that month. And when it moves from July to August to September, the whole amount is moving with it. It does have the ability to break apart the categories that are there. But for most organizations, it's kind of the summarized view of that. True, Salesforce does have things like product and revenue schedules, but that typically is just going to divide the amount evenly. And that's not realistic for most organizations. So when you think about revenue forecasting, our perspective on that is that most organizations have some performance or some obligation that they need to perform in order to get paid. It's much different than software where you just close that amount, divide it by 12 and move on. And so in order to go model what the obligations are going to be, they need some rules or some modeling capabilities to do that. The key concept here is that when it comes to revenue forecasting, that opportunity and that opportunity amount, when it moves from July to August to September to October, well, not only is the amount moving, but it's a trailing effect. The revenue is moving. It's moving out of quarters. It's moving out of fiscal years. And they need that capability to be able to go track that. Because people who are making decisions on how many people we're going to hire, do we have enough capacity in the manufacturing plant, or the person who's actually responsible for saying, what is the revenue going to be in 2024 versus 2025? Well, it's material if this opportunity slips from July to August to September. And there's a lot of industries that are struggling with this kind of variable revenue models. And that's what we'll explore now. These are the people that are coming to us typically fall in these kind of four broad categories. And the first is really software companies that are morphing or migrating from your traditional software. You think about Salesforce. Salesforce, as it rolled out Agentforce 1.0, now we're moving into 2.0, or Data Cloud, or incidences inside of Revenue Cloud. All of those are now being sold in this thing called consumption or usage-based models. Media could fall in this as well, where it's ad impressions over time. But really, each of these have this issue that it's not going to be the flat amount or the same amount over time. There's actually variability that's built into how they're actually going to achieve or deliver these usage and consumption-based models. You think about manufacturing and life sciences, where manufacturing is going to sell these pricing agreements, and the delivery of those goods and services are not going to be flat. There's going to be some seasonality built into that. And life sciences is another example where they do razor blade, where they're selling capital equipment, and then they have this variable model which they track as consumables. Now, business services is just another very simple example of organizations that struggle with this, where back to the $100,000 SOW opportunity, well, the resources, the bodies over time, they're going to be different. The project manager's time probably is going to be more in the beginning of the project than at towards the end. The QA engineer is going to be nothing at the beginning and spike at the end. So there's all this variability built across all these industries, and it makes it difficult to manage it with the current tools that are inside of Salesforce. The other things that are complicating things, as I mentioned, are really kind of what we've seen fall in these three buckets, these challenges that people have. As I mentioned earlier, opportunity amounts don't really reflect the realization of that revenue. And kind of to give you an example of this, I think about TransUnion. So TransUnion is kind of the flagship customer of revVana, with over 2,000 sales reps quoting credit checks. And you just think about, in that example, what they're doing. You think about the sales rep who sells credit checks to the auto industry, as opposed to the sales rep that sells credit checks to higher education. Well, that revenue contouring is going to be different based on industry. And so they need some capability to go model the fact that the auto industry, probably credit checks are going to be bigger in December, January, and summertime, and have troughs when people aren't buying cars. That's going to be fundamentally different than revenue contouring or modeling for higher education, where people that are applying for tuition and for grants, it's simply going to happen before school starts. Another difficult thing is that a lot of organizations, especially in the manufacturing and in healthcare, do not track all their revenue and opportunities. So you think about the fact that in the manufacturing world, these pricing agreements, widgets by some amount, a lot of those organizations are tracking this thing called run rate. In the healthcare industry, most organizations are tracking using opportunities to track the capital equipment, the net new sale of that, and then they go model again at the account level, what do they believe the consumable is going to be associated with that. And the last thing that makes it very difficult is the fact that the models, and the third thing is that the reason people are living inside of Excel is that they're modeling the revenue realization in Excel because that capability does not exist inside of Salesforce. It creates this really big problem. And the problem is this, is that maybe organizations do have the ability using product schedules or their own technology to go model what they think the realization is going to do based on historicals, based on their existing models, good use case for AI. Maybe that model is presented to the sales reps, but they want the sales reps to have the ability, since they're the ones talking to the customers, to override that. And what we see is they typically override that inside of Salesforce. And then the people in RevOps dump that into Excel and actually go build the models of what they think the realization is going to be. That creates this kind of complicated world where you've disconnected the modeling from the source. And where this distrust kind of typically happens, we see between finance and what's going on in Salesforce is the fact that pipeline is very dynamic. Things go up, things go down, things get delayed. And we talk to people or organizations that are exporting data on a weekly or a monthly or on a quarterly basis. And all of a sudden, they don't even know it's changed in there. And so that's very hard to go back and figure out what mix, what opportunities have changed. And we live in this kind of disconnected world. The other thing is when the modeling is done off platform, what people want to be able to do is to push that back into Salesforce. So the account managers, customer success, they get a sense of what is the realization, what should they be getting by these accounts. And again, if things are off, you want people to pick up the phone and go drive that behavior. So again, these are the challenges that we've seen. And what we're talking about now a little bit is what is Salesforce doing to go help address this? And then we'll talk, as I said, what is revVana doing as well? So you think about what Salesforce Manufacturing Cloud has been around for a little bit. And as the name suggests, what they're doing to go try and solve this issue of not being able to forecast on platform is they've come out with this thing called sales agreements. And so sales agreements are the capability to go track on an account by account basis, what do they believe the forecast is? They're forecasting what is the quantity of the revenue that's associated with that. Typically, they're integrating that with the back-end systems to be able to pull the actuals in. And again, go able to track forecasted versus actuals. But the manufacturing cloud, these sales agreements are typically created after things are closed won. They go build these sales agreements after that. When it comes to what we talked about, when it comes to consumption forecasting, when it comes to pipeline forecasting, both of those are products that are in pilot today. Consumption forecasting is really the next generation of collaborative forecasting, really designed to help organizations manage kind of complex hierarchies in the enterprise, these roll-ups that are associated with that, but also kind of give organizations the capability to have this single pane view to say, what do we believe is going to happen and what's actually occurring, and then go drive behavior that's based on that. And then the kind of last category that Salesforce has rolled out is this idea of revenue intelligence morphing into pipeline forecasting. And this slide's built for them. And this really falls under that category of sales forecasting. And I'll talk about revenue forecasting next. The key thing here and what sales forecasting, whether it's revenue intelligence from Salesforce, Clary, or RevView, these organizations are really designed to help people understand, organizations understand the health of the pipeline. You know, it's a great use of AI, which they're using to go mine a lot of information, go look for patterns, go develop patterns, and then go drive behaviors based on those patterns, things like next best actions. And at the end of the day, allowing organizations to get a sense of, is there enough pipeline? Is there enough business that's being closed to go meet the goals and objectives that are there? So when we say beyond, go beyond propensity to close, go beyond opportunity management, we're all in on those technologies. They are critical to help organizations get a sense and a view into what's going on in their organization. But we're saying that's only a part of the picture when it comes to understanding the total customer value that's associated with that. So market strategies with revenue intelligence, and we have joint customers with Clary. So when our view on this is that we can actually consume the health, the score that's associated with that. But what Derek's going to walk you through is kind of our view of being able to give a holistic view. You need the capability to, inside of Salesforce, to be able to, number one, drive revenue forecasts off any object, whether that's coming in through the opportunities, whether that's people managing run rate at the account level, whether they're tracking actuals at the order level. This capability to combine and summarize across all of Salesforce, all the revenue in the pipeline, as well as what's being closed won, to give that view into it. The second thing is you need to have a rules-based engine to go build in the seasonality and the patterns that are associated with that. And then last but not least, you need the capability to give organizations the sense that the data is always up to date. So as things go up and as things go down, you can make sure that the automation is built in to make sure that the product is always current. And at the end of the day, what are we doing? We're creating this very rich data set that allows you to go build really rich reports and dashboards to give everybody across the organization, from the CRO all the way to the CFO, to have one single pane view to be able to say, okay, what is the value of the organization? What is the total customer value? And ultimately, do we have enough revenue to meet our objectives? So with that, I'll let Derek take over and kind of walk you through an example of how revVana is being able to do that for other customers.
Of course. Thanks, Brian. Let me click on some things to share my screen. So this concept of calculating total customer value and being predictive on how much revenue is going to come from an engagement with a customer beyond just an opportunity, of course, not discounting, but including the opportunity revenue as well, is something that you can get when you kind of plug revVana into Salesforce. So here's an example of what may be on a sales rep screen. Their homepage is they log into Salesforce, or a manager or something like that, of what's going on with revenue at my accounts. And here we have forecasts versus actuals. So the account actuals are these things right here, what we're actually seeing coming in revenue. And then we have the other stacked bars of account run rate. So that's kind of like Brian was talking about. Potentially you have like a razor and razor blade model where you sell some type of equipment that needs replacement parts, or maybe you have different types of licensed software where you've released an AI agent and you're paying by outcomes or something like that, right? This could be the revenue that you're getting that's not necessarily subscription-based or one-time based, but recurring and not exactly predictable. So, just pay-as-you-go type of things, or orders as they're coming in for, physical goods, something like that. So here I can know what revenue I expected to come in March, April, May, and then what actually came in, and I can compare that. So my forecasts were a little off early, and then in a bad way where I wasn't getting the revenue I expected. And then later I'm getting more and more revenue than I had forecast. And you can kind of dive in and see where these predictions are coming from. And what that looks like in revVana is we break these down into plans. So this is a revVana plan. It's related to an opportunity. I'll hop back to the opportunity real quick. Here I have like a close date, a probability, and an amount. This is what you would get kind of basic in Salesforce, and it would just kind of say, hey, you're going to get $205,000 on January 1st, which, that could be true for some of the products you're selling, but for a variety of things that you have on here is probably not necessarily true. So here in this deal, what revVana does is it models the revenue over time for every specific thing that I'm selling. So for hardware, it will be modeled as one time right at the beginning of the deal. I have some user licenses for some software here that are going to have different start dates and potentially prorate for partial months, and they're going to be even spread over time after that. Then we get into more interesting things like consumption-based products. revVana here will actually provide a prediction based on the account type and segment, and then the actual product that you're selling. That gives you a ramp over time. So here these grow and they fluctuate over time, the revenue, and that's based off of assumptions that we can mine from actual data, or that you can use from other RevOps practices where you're potentially modeling these things in Excel or something like that. And it's not just necessarily revenue that we can track. I'm going to close some of these extra things and just focus in on the consumption products here. But we can look at a lot of different things that are being monitored over time. So here I have two consumption products. I have storage and API consumption. I can model the total consumption and then the expected quantity per month. So if there's some type of threshold, you can see I have like a remaining usage based off of the initial estimate. I can find out when I'm going to hit that, if there's going to be any type of overage or something. For this product, it ends out exactly nice at 0. For this other one we modeled, and it's usually that when people buy this API consumption, they start to go over the limit. So we can see when that's going to happen here. And you can also see the ramp percentages that are being applied here. The ramp percentages can come from, analytics. They can be put in manually, but effectively, I'll show you a version of what this looks like. Here, every single product for a given account industry and segment can have its own pattern to predict, hey, I've never sold to this particular company before, but I know that they're an enterprise technology company and that typically their API consumption will ramp like this. Other things that are modeling and giving you, again, like this full customer value picture here are some of the actuals here. So here, actuals can be loaded into the same plan structure that you have in Salesforce to analyze everything out of the same data model to understand what's been going on here. So here's like our opportunity, like our subscription booked business, and then things that are non-op revenue that are coming in that are potentially, one-time purchases, consumption products that are not related directly to an opportunity. Overall, when you are using revVana to do this, you can model what we call like a book of business plan to kind of summarize everything that's going on with all of the given accounts for a sales rep. So they can go in and put in their own forecasts based off of pipeline or booked revenue. And then over time, as we get into like the new year, there's going to be pipeline revenue that's active that we can combine with the booked revenue to give a total forecast. And we can include AI models. We can include finance models that you're already running to give a picture of what analytics and statistics are telling us we should be getting out of this particular account. But then the sales team can override that and put in their own call because they have a relationship with the customer and they have their own ideas about what might be going on with that particular account. As actuals are then like put in through the system and everything, we can then present, we can then generate data around trends that we'd see for a given account or a particular, or in some cases, a particular product if we wanted to do that. So all in all, with the rich data that you already have in Salesforce and the day-to-day activities that people are already doing, it's possible to generate a lot of these forecasts and metrics that are likely being calculated offline in some other systems. But now the data is available for the sales team directly. They can see what's going on and understand if they need to intervene with an account. And that's kind of all that I have to contribute here.
Perfect. Thank you both for going through that. I dropped a link earlier. If anyone is interested in scheduling some time to talk and see how we work with your custom Salesforce org, feel free to book some time with us. I'll open it up to the Q&A portion now. So if anybody has any questions for our two speakers today, feel free to type them in the LinkedIn chat. While we're waiting for a few of those to go in, I've got some questions that we've heard from leads and prospects just in the past few months, which I think would be good to answer here. But the first one is, would revVana work with some of the newer tools that are being rolled out by Salesforce, such as consumption forecasting? Do we compete? Are we compatible with them?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. So definitely compatible. Same with sales agreements. So where revVana fits into that world is, number one, the idea that the seasonality, we talked about this variability that's built into it. That's what our rules-based engine will be able to do. The second thing, and Phil Cooper, who's the VP of product management, both those products, consumption forecasting and pipeline forecasting, fall under him. His observation when we met with him and at the tower was that what revVana does is we actually create the data. So all those tools can consume and aggregate and give single pane views, but they need the data to be able to do that. And so what we're doing really for Salesforce is creating this really rich data set. And that data set can be any metric you want. So Derek gave examples of revenue, of quantity. We have organizations doing, cash forecasting with us. They have multi-currency. There's all these kind of KPIs and the different metrics they want to be able to do. So not only can we help feed those systems, we also can provide other metrics that can be developed as well.
Yeah, and I decided to share my screen because I didn't mention one specific thing that ties into this question. We integrate very well with Data Cloud. So these account revenue patterns, they can come from actuals that are getting stored in Data Cloud to generate revenue trends for a given account. And again, like this can be configured to put out metrics at kind of any level you want. So here we have an example of like account just overall spend. But we could also do specific products by account, or if you want to just understand product performance metrics, you can do product revenue as well. And I think, we do have this connected to Data Cloud right now. So the data that's feeding this predictive engine is all already in Data Cloud. Any other questions, Brandon?
Yes. Second question we had, and this is probably more suited for you. But when it comes to actuals, do you have best practices on how to actually get them inside of Salesforce?
I think I maybe just pre-answered that, but a great way would be to use Data Cloud, of course, any other integration points. A lot of companies that we work with already have records using the order object, either a standard one or a custom one that they integrate to an ERP, such as like NetSuite or some type of provisioning system that's tracking consumption, something like that. That there's typically some natural touch point that's already happening. But if not, Data Cloud is a great way to bring that into the system.
Sweet. Thanks for answering that. It looks like that's all of our questions. I just dropped another link to schedule some time to talk with us. So if anybody's curious again on how we can work directly with your Salesforce org, feel free to schedule some time to talk with us. But Derek, Brian, thank you so much for being here, and everybody attending as well. We appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, guys.